Lisa Dorsey is offline. Last night she was able to call in, so there might be something holding her up a bit. So it is now 5:37. I'm Sheila Vaccaro with Nick Allen, and hopefully Lisa drops in shortly. So the first thing is to ask for comments, suggestions, and petitions by residents.
Darrell Cook, South Walnut Street. If someone steals my car, that's a crime, right? If someone comes on my property illegally and I'm unable to use my vehicle, that's a crime, right? I'd like to know how private property illegal parking is handled. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to discussion items, and we're going to start with the fire department report. Chief Pelna.
Good evening, Steve Pelna, Fire Chief. Busy month for us. Last month, 164 calls. That's a new record for us for 1 month. We had the Sound the Alarm event that we partnered with the American Red Cross, where we distributed smoke alarms throughout the borough. It was a great event. We were able to install dozens of smoke alarms. We had local volunteers from the community and also throughout the region that American Red Cross brought in. I even had my 9-year-old son do some volunteer work for Cub Scouts, and he had the opportunity to hang some smoke detectors. So overall, great event to help with overall public safety. And we were also out there training our residents as well, talking about escape plans. So it was a really good event. And American Red Cross does an amazing job. They brought out over 60 volunteers, so it was pretty cool. We had 7 volunteers graduate from basic fire school, 3 of which were through the Octorara Homeland Security Program, which is a recruitment tool that we've used where our local high schools utilize a public safety training campus in Coatesville as half of their school day, and they can pick a direction, whether it's fire, EMS, or law enforcement. So it's a really great program through the county, and it's yielded quite a great group of folks for us. Summer approaches, just a friendly public service announcement reminder to people using fire pits, making sure they use them safely and away from buildings. And PIO March set up a tour of 6ABC. So a group of us from the police department, the fire department, and Good Fellowship attended a site tour 6ABC yesterday. So that was great. And one final public service announcement. So the swings that we have in our parks, specifically at Everhart Park, the children's swings are designed for 3 or under, not 13-year-olds. So just a reminder, teenagers, not to try to climb into the children's swings, or we'll be finding a way to get them out. Luckily on this one, we were able to get the young lady out without any damage to our property, and we were able to get the swing back in service. So just a nice friendly reminder to the amazing park that we have at Everhart, which we all utilize. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you so
Yep.
much.
Yeah, I mean, do you know if they go to Pierce Middle School?
What's that?
Do you know if they go to Pierce Middle School where I teach?
They might. I can get you a name.
I just want to give them a hard time.
Yeah.
So thank you.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Now the police report. Thank you, Chief Moorhead.
Good evening, Jim Moorhead, Chief of Police. For the month of April, the police department responded to 3,303 calls for service, of which 2,554 of those were in the borough. As far as Part 1 and Part 2 crime goes, our Part 1 most serious crime, as well as our Part 2 nuisance and property crime, were down in both categories compared to this time last year, which is a good thing. You'll notice under Part 1 crime, all the way to the right, you'll see an arson. That was related to East Bradford Township, so that's not a concern with the borough, and that is under investigation. There's nothing notable for Part 2 crime, and I would just like to mention that a week and a half ago, we had an incident where there was 2 car accidents on Gay Street, and there was some questions that came up about this in relation to the open air market. This was an accident, and if it was a time when the street was closed, when Gay Street was closed, that the vehicles involved, both stolen, would have certainly tried to turn to avoid the barriers, because they were certainly trying to avoid the accidents that they were even involved in. So this was not an intentional act, and this was just an incident that occurred during a time when the street was open. So I just want to assure everybody that concerns of public safety were taken seriously that evening. And I'll take any of your questions.
I saw that that had happened, and thank you for everything that you did do there. But in relation to the shutdown of Gay Street, I'm actually looking forward to when we have the proper gates up, and that will be an extra barrier towards safety. But before we get there, I want to address the temporary parking that is happening at the end of the blocks. I want to encourage it, but I want it regulated and enforced in a predictable way. And I'm going to have to talk with parking as well as you and sort of figure out how to do that. I just want to put that on your radar, that the end of the blocks and the pickup of food and all, the temporary parking that is going on needs to be somehow looped into the mix of this regularly shut down street. Just want to make sure that we're all thinking about that and aware of that. I have also been made aware of multiple accidents on Gay Street over the past few months that make me very nervous and look forward to more shutdown time rather than what is going on right now. So
Okay.
just saying that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And also, I'd like to remind everybody that next week, beginning May 15th, running the whole week, it's National Police Week. So it's a time for us to have a moment to celebrate and reflect on all the officers that have been injured, killed in the line of duty, as well as those that provide the service to our nation today. So look forward to the events coming up next week. Thank you.
Thank you
Yep.
so much. We're going to move on to the EMS report. Chief Brogan.
Justin Robbins, Assistant Chief, Good Fellowship Ambulance. For the month of April, we responded to 184 calls in the borough. Pretty typical for us. We stayed pretty busy on the weekends. I'll skip back here to my last page here. Our drug and alcohol cases are up a little bit. We're hoping that they slow down a little bit as the summer months come in here. And if you look at our call types here, everything's in line with what we're seeing. It looks like we're getting back to those pre-COVID lineups with all those items. So we're pretty excited about that. And then just a few announcements I wanted to make while we were up here. First, following Police Week will actually be EMS Week from the 21st to the 27th. And for the first time since COVID, we are actually going to be hosting our EMS Week open house. So we're hoping everybody can join us. It's going to be Thursday, the 25th. Very excited to have that back. Hoping to see everybody make an appearance there. And then I would just like to take this opportunity to formally introduce our new Executive Director, Tom Wilcox, who's been able to join me tonight here. I'm sure you'll be seeing him around a lot more. Any questions?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We're going to move on to D, which is a schedule a public hearing date to amend Chapter 3, Section 338N to appoint 2 alternates to the Civil Service Commission.
As everyone recalls, this was an effort to add some membership to the Civil Service Commission. In order to do that, we would have to amend the ordinance to make that possible. We're also going to have to amend the rules and regulations of the Civil Service Commission. Should council approve this ordinance, we'll need to amend those rules and regulations. We do that by resolution. So that'll be an easier process that won't require anything more than it being placed on the agenda and voted on. Kristen did, our solicitor did introduce an edit to this ordinance since you saw it last. It's highlighted in yellow in the attachment. And that was in order to address the fact that it wasn't clear what alternate would be in effect based on seniority if you appointed them at the same time. So this language in here allows the Civil Service Commission to create a rotating schedule of which alternate gets to serve should there be a opening on the civil service, a need for that alternate to sit on the Civil Service Commission for a particular hearing. The reason we're being so careful about Civil Service Commission is that they are one of the two boards, well, three if you include Human Relations Commission. It's almost quasi-administrative. They're one of the two boards that have administrative functions. So their decisions that they render have impacts. They can lead to disputes with labor unions. They can lead to all sorts of actions that could take place in court of law, just like zoning hearing board. So that's why we're being really careful about following proper procedure and passing the ordinance and making sure it's clear which alternate is properly designated should they be needed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any questions about it. I think it's a good idea.
All right, then we're going to move on to Price Street, Remington Burnick.
Good evening. I'm Kelly Goff, the traffic engineering consultant for the borough. This item is related to the Price Street and Brandywine analysis. At the request of the borough, we performed an analysis for the feasibility of providing an all-way stop control at the intersection of Price and Brandywine. We used PennDOT guidelines not only because this is best practices, but Price Street is a state route, so any final determination will have to be coordinated with PennDOT. So the guidelines includes 3 different elements. We reviewed the traffic data and volume at this intersection. There's 3, and then we also reviewed the crash data, and we also performed a site inspection of the road geometry. So element number 1 is the traffic data collection. So we collected vehicle traffic, pedestrian traffic, and bicycle traffic at that intersection. And you also have to, and we also collected the wait time at that intersection. So the average wait time was 14 seconds. In order to meet the warrant, it would have to be at least 30 seconds. We collected data on Brandywine Street, the number of vehicles, pedestrians, and bicycles going from Brandywine Street needs to exceed 200 for an 8-hour period, 200 per hour for an 8-hour period. It did not meet that warrant. The last item for volume is vehicles going through Price Street, and that has to be at least 300 vehicles per hour for an 8-hour period, and it did meet the warrant for that one. But in order to meet the warrant for the volume, it would have to meet all 3 of those, the 300 number along Price Street, the 200 number along Brandywine, and the 30-second wait time. The second element that we reviewed was the crash data. Per MUTC guidelines and PennDOT guidelines, you need to have at least 5 correctable crashes per year for a 5-year period. There was only 6 reportable during this 5-year period that we reviewed, and one of them was correctable, or one of them was not correctable, rather. Not correctable crash is something, for example, this one was related to a DUI. The third element reviewed was the site geometry. So we reviewed the stopping site distance as well as the intersection site distance. There is a shrub at the corner there that could affect the site distance, and also when we were out there, the site distance did not appear to be impeded. However, if that shrub were to grow, the site distance may be impeded as well. And also, if there's vehicles parked along there, the vehicles may impede the site distance. At the time, there were no vehicles parked there, but if there were vehicles parked there, there may be a site distance. It may meet the site distance requirements. So my recommendations is to gather this data and petition and present this to PennDOT in order for them to make the determination if an all-way stop control is warranted at this intersection. Ultimately, it would be their decision. I also wanted to point out that allowing vehicles to park along that street acts as a traffic calming measure. So if you did allow vehicles to park along that street, vehicles would theoretically slow down. However, there is the potential to impede the sight distance. So allowing vehicles to park along that street would slow it down, but I recommend doing a follow-up sight distance inspection after allowing these vehicles to park on that street. And that concludes our report results. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, if I can add on and thank you, Kelly, and your team for looking at this for us. So what it basically boils down to is that it's unlikely that the PennDOT would approve a stop sign at this intersection. We're actually recommending that council direct staff, we talked about this, to go ahead and apply anyway. Because there is an opportunity through a phrase you mentioned, and I keep forgetting it every time you say it, Kelly.
Engineering judgment.
There you go. Where it creates an opportunity for PennDOT to agree that that the intersection would warrant an all-way stop. And it was enlightening to me to go through this process and to understand the sight distance requirements that Kelly just mentioned. If you look in the report, the numbers are pretty large. So what that means is in the present condition, when that intersection isn't four-way stop controlled, you need to be able to see considerable distance east and west, free of obstructions, to safely enter the roadway. That's the condition that exists out there mostly today because it's not being parked. But we want cars on the street as a potential easy solution to traffic calming. We know we have a speeding issue on this street. The data shows that. So in a roundabout way, I think it backs us into wanting a four-way stop at this location, because if there were a stop there, we could park that street within 25 or 30 feet, I believe is the number of the stopped intersection. And we could get those cars on the street. There would be more visual impedance when people are driving on the street, and that does naturally slow people down. What I'd like to do somewhere down the road is a follow-up study to see if these have had the effect that we want. But the ask of this committee and council on Monday and Wednesday is to instruct the staff to apply to PennDOT with this information. It'd be real easy to do, right, Kelly? We've already done all the heavy lifting.
Yes, we used the form basically to perform this analysis.
I'd like you to go ahead and do it. Talk to PennDOT.
Yeah, and then for me, I guess what I find interesting, like I've learned a lot in this process as well, which is what I love being on council because of that. But something that is just not sitting perfectly right with me right now is the idea that we could like basically copy paste that intersection, including the shrub and all the geometry of what's happening there, somewhere where there's no pedestrians, and that would not change, to my understanding, the results of this. And likewise, we could copy paste the same geometry somewhere with like 4 times as many pedestrians. Like is there any pedestrian input into these warrants at all?
So one of the warrants did measure the pedestrian count at that intersection, and it actually did not meet the warrant for pedestrian count.
You know, I even wrote that down when he said that. You said vehicle, pedestrian, and bike traffic, didn't you? Okay, well, hey, that's good to know. So that does sit a little better with me. I've been walking in this area a lot recently, and I'm pretty sympathetic to wanting a stop sign there. So I do agree that I think it's a good idea for us to go ahead and see if we can get it done anyway. My other question is mainly, and I asked this last month, like, what's the negative for putting in a stop sign? I know, like pollution is something.
Some of the negatives would be the increased sound of vehicles starting and stopping.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
In my understanding, the committee recommends 2-0 to instruct the staff to apply to PennDOT.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Vince. Yes.
Hi, I'm Vince Vicello. I'm sorry to have to burden you with my comments tonight, but we'll get through it pretty quickly. Thanks for a really comprehensive study, by the way. And I also learned an awful lot. Although I've been through this once before at the very same intersection about 4 years ago. Although we didn't go through the formality of the study, PennDOT just came in and said, go away. So I want to make a couple of observations. I live on Price Street. I've lived on Price Street for a long time. Things that may be helpful to you is that number one, it is a residential community. Secondly, my observation is that the majority of the traffic we're experiencing is mainly local traffic. I think we're getting some through traffic, but a lot of it is local because after 6 p.m., after 7 p.m., things die. They really it comes down to a few notches in terms of the volumes of traffic that we're seeing. That includes both commercial vehicles as well as passenger vehicles. Did I do that? Okay. So basically, I think we're dealing with a very local type situation here. And I think when you say that engineering judgment may come into play as to whether or not we can get a stop sign in, I think that is a really important point because again, we are talking about a local situation, very local traffic. This is not 202. The second observation I want to make is that people don't cross the street at pedestrians don't cross at Brandywine Street because they won't do it. It's too damn dangerous. I've talked to a lot of people, not just on Price Street, but also on Brandywine Street, Dean Street, Sharpless Street, while we were doing the petition signing, and they stay away from that intersection. Not only do they refuse to cross at that intersection because of vehicles moving as quickly as they do, but they won't even take their vehicles there because of the speeds of some of the vehicles. Now, your data will suggest that we don't have a horrendous speeding problem, but we have enough of a speeding problem, I think, for it to be a real concern. The only other thing I would like to say is that I really would hope that this is not going to go away. I think we're hitting a tipping point in the borough. We have to understand that there's no construction of bypasses that will occur around the borough of Westchester in the future. We are not going to see the 322 bypass interchange done. It's not going to happen. It's all been developed out there, okay? And secondly, we're not going to see the southern bypass because East Bradford Township is totally opposed to it, as is Westchester University because of the Gordon Environmental Center, okay? So I think you've got to reckon with how you're going to manage all these vehicles going through these residential neighborhoods with all the development that will continue to go on, both inside and outside the borough. It's like you might have seen that email that I forwarded to you from one of the residents. It's like, what's happening to our town? This is not the town that I moved to 15 years ago, they said, and it's not the town I moved to 25 years ago. Thanks. Appreciate your efforts.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to consider drafting an ordinance to utilize third-party billing services and seeking reimbursement for costs related to emergency vehicles provided in the borough of Westchester.
Good evening, Steve Pownall, Fire Chief again. So I'm seeking approval for a cost recovery ordinance. There's no real open items at this point. It's more of a proactive measure. So I sit on the Eastern Fire Chiefs, and our neighboring municipalities have put this into place. So the idea is, especially with as we see all of our increasing costs in consumables and our equipment, when we do respond to larger incidents, it's inherently an inherently dangerous job. So we find that things get broken, things get lost, and we use stuff. And up until this point, as of recent, we've been able to absorb that cost within our budget. But between the cost of fuel and our repairs that we're seeing those skyrocket, we're not able to absorb those costs that we always have. So we're looking for alternative measures to to bring revenue in, or at least make us whole. It's really not truly to generate funds off of. It's to replace what we already have. So, in generally speaking, larger incidents, there's already an insurance claim that's been put in. You know, the property owner, business owner has a claim for their loss. So we're looking to tag on to that that actual claim with that. So anyway, the ordinance that you guys have in your packet, it outlines it. We put this into place through West Goshen, through the coalition, with the township, ourselves, Goshen Fire Company, and Good Fellowship. So this is the model we used. Kristen Camp helped with us write it. This one here, she added to change the names a little bit, but she did highlight some areas. And specifically, I just want to say too, not only does this bring funding in for us, but we would also use it for some EMS funding. When EMS supports the fire department, we take them out of service during that time, and they provide services for our firefighters on the fire ground. So we'd be able to bill for some of their services as well. But specifically, Kristen highlighted some sections in yellow, and that's a little bit more for your debate should you decide to move forward with the ordinance. These, I wouldn't say were sticking points, but at least within the supervisors at West Goshen, there was kind of a mixed bag of responses on this. So this would be more, of course, if there's other areas, but specifically these. So under C, we look at the actual policy limits within our service area. So you'll see throughout the document, this just covers our service area, so where we respond to, and specifically the borough. But under C, it's as far as the policy limit, so at least it was the thought process of the majority of the supervisors in West Goshen to only bill up to the policy limits of the policy holder. You know, I'm kind of on the other side of that, where that doesn't help us any. If if they're over their limits, that really doesn't affect us either way. We still have our costs of our equipment to go over. So that's, again, something for you guys to figure out. And really the idea behind that is, just using a name. If we went to Mrs. Jones' house, they don't want to actually bill Mrs. Jones. They want to bill her carrier, State Farm or whatever. So they don't want to see the resident actually absorb any of the costs, which I agree with. However, especially if you're looking at a commercial entity, if they exhaust their policy limits, we still have our costs for doing business. Under D, that is just to adopt a separate resolution on a rate schedule. Again, we have that attached as well in your packet to whether you want to have a set rate sheet or not. And that's something we could certainly, because it's a resolution, we could take a look at annually to ensure we're covering our costs. F also talks about, as we see it, we call it our first due, our primary coverage area. That covers that as well. And then finally, under 4, as far as anybody outside of the third party billing service or the fire department making an attempt to recover any of those costs outside of the actual insurance carrier company. And I have a mixed feeling on that one. I'll give you an example. So we had a commercial fire a year ago. It was in West Goshen, and I had a personal relationship with the owner. I was able to pass on our cost rate to them, and they paid it. So without hesitation, because they know the service they're getting for us or from us for basically saving their business. They just they had to buy some hose and fill up some fire extinguishers. So leaving that in wouldn't give us the ability to cut out the third party for the billing. And then there's a 60-day termination. If we do get into this and find that it's another great avenue for revenue, it's something we want to take over internally, we can terminate the contract with a 60-day notice. So you'll see attached to this is a PA Recovery Services. Again, a lot of our neighbors are using that company. They're out of Pennsylvania. They know Pennsylvania laws. They deal with Pennsylvania fire companies throughout Pennsylvania. So they would be the best candidate for that. No upfront cost for us or throughout this. You can see, I think it's under 2 there. They would take 15% off of the money recovered, as long as it's within the 6 months. So upfront cost for you would be Kristen's time to generate the ordinance and the resolution. But other than that, no cost to the borough upfront or during the process. The fire department, we would take the information that we gained from the incident, pass it on to PA Recovery Services. They would generate an invoice. They would do the recovery. We would get a check in the mail.
It sounds good to me.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's still some questions, so.
There's really nothing precluding us from just billing right now. We absolutely could, but the ordinance gives us a little more teeth if there was any pushback from the responsible party.
So it sounds like a good thing, in my opinion. Nick's in agreement. Do we just move this forward
So-
as is, or?
So what would happen, at least, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, talking to Kristen, this is just giving her the permission to clean up the document. If you approve, go off to council, approve the ordinance in general, and then she would clean up the document and would have to go through the 30 days or 60? 30-day posting.
I think we're going to say yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to 4 action items. Approve the April 2023 Public Safety and Quality of Life meeting minutes. So approved. And is there any other business? Seeing none, we're going to adjourn.